Welcome back to the Nosa Unleashed podcast. I'm Laura Burgoyne, joined here with my sister Connie Blackwood as we talk about real life issues that impact us in our daily lives. And today we're going to be continuing the conversation about forgiveness. But today we want to focus on forgiving ourselves. And I think in a lot of cases, sometimes forgiving ourselves is much harder than it is to release forgiveness to others. And so, welcome, Connie, to the conversation.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Forgiveness, such a huge topic, and yet, I feel like we don't talk about it enough. I feel like a lot of us kind of wander and struggle through life, and we don't really know how to get free. And I think if we had a greater understanding about forgiveness and how it hinders us from moving forward, you know, it might shift the way we think about forgiveness. But today we want to focus more on, self-forgiveness, right? And, you know, as we talked about last week, sometimes it's hard to let other people off the hook. I find it very hard to let myself off the hook, right? I've done a lot of things in my life that I regret. A lot of things, a lot of times when I've harmed other people, I treated them in ways that, it's even sometimes hard for me to talk about, right? Because there's so much shame or guilt associated with some of these things. And in some of the cases, like, these things I even did to strangers. I'll never see them again. I'll never have the opportunity to even apologize or ask for forgiveness. And so sometimes in cases like that, it's just hard to forgive myself. How do you do in this area, Connie, with self-forgiveness?
Well, I find it way harder to forgive myself than it is to forgive other people. I think over time I've been able to kind of adopt like an attitude of forgiveness towards other people. But for myself, it's like I hold myself almost to a higher level. And I also know like every bad thing I think, let alone the bad things that I do to other people. And so I think when it comes down to it, I know the deep, dark secrets of my mind and my heart, and no one else does. And so when it comes to forgiveness, it's harder to forgive myself. It really is. You know,
Mhm.
I I look at all those things and I'm just like, sometimes I just think I'm not worthy of being forgiven. So
Right.
yeah, I hear you.
So, seeing as how it's so difficult, like, have you have you learned how to step into self-forgiveness, and what does that look like for you?
I do, but it's more of a process than it is for forgiving other people because I feel like first step of forgiving myself is actually being honest with myself about what it is I've
Mhm.
done. Because I think that's also another place where, you know, I can self-deceive myself and go, oh, I'm doing good. I haven't hurt anyone lately until I sit down and I go, okay, have I actually not hurt anyone lately? So it
Right.
takes me actually sitting down and being honest with myself about the things I say, the things I do, the things I don't do, right? That I should know that would be helpful if I did for people. Um,
Mhm.
and so even those things like, what could I have done that I said I'm too busy for? But I could have done it if I wanted to or if I chose to, but I said I was too
Right.
busy. Right. So those things that are like things I need to forgive myself on a regular basis. And I think those things are easier than when I've really, really harmed someone. So like when my dad was passing away, that was hard because my expectation of myself was to spend more time with him. And I knew that he was deteriorating. And yet I tended to keep my distance. And I would chalk it up to things going on in the family, or I chalk it up to them being too busy. But honestly, I kept myself in the headspace, oh, I'm too busy, they're too busy. And so I didn't spend as much time with him as I could have, and that was something, as his last days were coming, that I was really struggling with myself, like being able to forgive myself for all of that missed time, because then there's no way to make it up, right? He only
Right.
has this much time left. We know that it's not long. And so even then, I'm like, I can never make up the time that's been lost. All I can do is make every minute with him now count. And so that was like the forgiveness process for myself, was being able to let go of that and say, okay, I can't change the past. I have to forgive myself, let it go. And the only thing I can do is make it different now. And so when I was there with him, I made every moment count. And then I got
Right.
sick. And when I got sick, I think that was the roughest week for me, because I was there off, like I was there like regularly, and then all of a sudden I'm sick and I can't be there for a week. And I'm like, he's dying, like, and I'm missing another week, and
Right.
that I had to forgive myself in that week, because I'm like, this is out of my control. And I don't want to make everyone sick, including I could lose my dad sooner if I go see him now. Right. Like, I'm like,
Right.
no, I can't go. So for me, I had to forgive myself again, and then make every minute count. And it was amazing to me that in me doing that, there was this time that I actually had with my dad before he passed away, where I was able to tell him everything I've ever wanted to say. And he said everything he needed to say to me, and we hugged. And he gave me a hug I haven't had in so long. And he wasn't very strong, but it was so tight. And I was like, that's exactly what I needed. Right. And so even in that, I feel like I caught all that missed time in that one moment.
Right. And that's the thing about forgiveness. A lot of times we can't get that time back. We can't go backwards and we don't get a redo, right? But it's having that kindness and compassion and empathy even for ourselves and what we were going through, right? And being willing to release ourselves from that. I know one area for me that comes to mind was when I was younger. We had a difficult upbringing, and I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression and suicidal tendencies. And I was bullied mercilessly at school. And it was in the summer of grade 7 that I realized if I became the bully, then nobody could bully me. And so then I became a very angry, rageful person, and I would unleash on anyone that I saw. And the kids at school were terrified of me. Even as I walked down the hall, it was like the parting of the Red Sea. Kids would just walk the other way. With one look, I could completely send a kid to flight. And I remember this one day, like I would do awful things to kids, but there's one day, I will never forget this day. This girl came up to me and she said, "Can you do something about this? This boy is irritating me." And I didn't even ask her name. I didn't ask her what the boys was doing to her. Like, I didn't seek any information. Literally all I did was I said, "Who is this guy?" She pointed at him. He was in the lobby just before you head out of the school, and he was hanging out there with 3 of his friends. And I just walked over to him, and with my steel-toed shoes, I canned him as hard as I could. He dropped to the ground, writhing in pain, and he was there for a very long time. I walked away, feeling accomplished that I had showed him who was boss. But much time passed by, and I realized, like, I didn't wanna be this rageful person. It wasn't benefiting me at all, and I held a lot of shame and guilt about what I did, especially to this young boy, because, there's a good chance that, my actions could cause him to not have children. Um, and it took me a long time to forgive myself for that period, in my life. But I had to, first of all, take responsibility for my actions, right? I didn't even know who the kid is, so it's not like I can go back in time and apologize and ask for forgiveness and say, "I'm so sorry, you didn't deserve that." Like, I can't do any of that. But I can recognize that I what I did was wrong and have compassion on myself and recognize that, that for me, that was a coping mechanism. For me, that was a way that I could stay out of physical harm's way. That was a way for me to self-protect, right? Um, so just having empathy for myself, but then, learning to make different choices, right? I think that's part of forgiveness too, is when you recognize, you know, something in your life that you wish you had never done or you wish you had never operated that way. A part of self-forgiveness, I think, is learning how to do it a new way, right? And for you, Connie, even that could be like the relationships that you have left, right? Finding ways to spend more time with people, right? For me, it's reaching out to people and showing compassion and empathy and, standing up for those that are being bullied, right? Recognizing how detrimental that is on a young person or any person for that matter and, make better choices in the future. But I had to walk through some forgiveness of myself, release myself from a lot of things that I did as a young youth, um, that I'm not pleased with, and it's sometimes difficult to talk about, but, that was my reality back then. And, yeah, so I think really just taking responsibility, coming to terms with what was going on in your life at the time, and then being willing to forgive yourself and release yourself from the consequences of that, and learning not to do it again. I think that's huge.
And I think it's also like having that compassion for yourself and knowing that even if you think you're not worthy of forgiveness, like God's forgiven us of everything. So he deems us worthy of forgiveness. So if he can forgive us, maybe we should be able to forgive ourselves because he knows everything. He knows all our
Mhm.
thoughts, all our actions, everything behind the scenes. And yet he still deems us worthy of forgiveness. And so there comes this place where once we understand that and see that clearly, it increases our capacity for compassion for ourselves and our level of like, oh, there is something about me that's worthy if he's willing to forgive me, right?
Right.
So it does help me anyway process through.
Yeah. Any last thoughts, Connie, before we finish up for today when it comes to, forgiving ourselves?
Um, I think a lot of times we get stuck in these places, and we don't even recognize that we're stuck. And um, it's just being able to recognize if there's a place of unforgiveness towards ourselves that needs to be addressed can be the key to unlocking that and getting us unstuck. So if you ever feel like you're stuck, just take a look and see if there's any areas where you're like maybe holding yourself to something, holding yourself
Mhm.
account like at a higher standard than you should, or if you're really guilty of it, then maybe recognizing that you're holding that against yourself so that you can do something about it and make a different choice going forward. Like Laura was saying, that is a huge key because we're the only ones who can change us. No one else can change us, just like we can't change anyone else. So if anyone's going to be able to make a different choice going forward, it's you, right? For yourself
Mhm.
or me, for myself. And so, yeah, just being able to do that is a huge key in getting unstuck.
Yeah. Well, this is a topic I think, I actually have very rarely heard it even be talked about, but I think that it is a very large key to us stepping into freedom in a lot of areas of our life. And a lot of the things that we struggle with or on a daily basis sometimes is our own personal self-talk, right?
Mhm.
We come from a lot of shame or a lot of guilt from past decisions, and we need to deal with that. We can't sweep it under the carpet any longer. We can't just ignore it and pretend that it doesn't exist, because it does. And I think, part of what Connie and I want to do is bring light to these matters and bring them to light so that we can look at them for what they are and choose to deal with them. And so we hope that this encourages you to do that, that it encourages you to kind of look at your life and do some self-examining. That's a new word, examining. And, you know, is there any areas that you need to step in forgiveness for yourself? And sometimes if you have the ability to, even going and asking for forgiveness from the people that you've harmed, restoring relationship, creating new bonds of connection, right? If you have the opportunity to do that, I would encourage you to do that. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes those people are no longer in our lives. Um, and in my case, I had no idea who the person even was that I had harmed. Um, so sometimes, there won't be that interaction of forgiveness, of really releasing yourself. But I think it's important that we still walk through this process. So if you want further information, feel free to check out our website at nosafoundation.com. We have many different resources there, and we have previous recordings of webinars, and also the podcast on there as well. If you want to listen to other older episodes, you can check that out as well. And we thank you for joining us here on the No Sound Leash podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.